Hi there, this is David and happy 4th of July. Growing up, my father was in the Air Force and Independence Day has always been very important to me and my family. And I thought what better way to celebrate it than to look at how American culture is represented in JRPGs. Sometimes it's just very subtle references here and there. I mean, you can blink and you'll miss them. Other times though, it's pretty overt. So here I'm going to be ranking these games according to just how much Americana they have. So, let's go ahead and get started. Number 10. Decadus of Secret of the Stars. While Secret of the Stars is mostly just known as a crappy JRPG, it actually does have an American-inspired town, that of Decadus, though it's not depicted very well. The city is the largest in the game, segregated into 4 sections: the commercial district, the upper and lower sides, as well as the governmental area. When you first arrive, border control is on your ass, so you have to dig your way under the wall. Yeah, I know, I see the parallels too. But anyway, there's a ton of stuff to see and do here, from attending the circus, recruiting a drunk, bombing your way into the wealthy side of town, manipulating a corrupt election, and even flying a rocket ship to the floating continent. What could be more American than that? Number 9. Frisia of Illusion of Gaia. This game was one of my childhood favorites, following the adventures of Will as he goes around the world. However, I believe that the American portion of the world was kind of censored into oblivion here. Every other location in the game has an easy-to-identify, real-world counterpart, but not America, unless you kind of look under the surface. Enter Frisia, undoubtedly the most beautiful town in the game, and all the buildings are kind of built on top of each other. And then there's the flowers blowing in the wind. It's just a joy to explore. However, it's also hiding a dark, secret underside, that of slums and slave traders who convince people to come here to escape starvation, not realizing that they're actually agreeing to become slaves. As they say, every rose has its thorns. But now, we're moving on to towns that are distinctly based on real-world American cities. Number 7. Freedom of Terranigma. Like Illusion of Gaia, all the towns in Terranigma are based off of the real world, but here they're not one and done. You can actually build up each town's reputation and increase their economy, as well as trade routes based upon your actions. This is such a cool idea, because it's a joy to see how each and every town expands and grows. Freedom, though, is the American town based off of Washington, D.C. There's a fun letter trading sequence that will take you around the world, girls who want more fashionable clothes, and another woman who asked for wine. If you do those quests, you'll increase Freedom's economic index, as well as other towns around the world. There's also Eddie the Inventor, based off of Thomas Edison, Bell, based off of Alexander Graham Bell, and a veritable Tony Hawk skater. Number 8. Newtown and Sioux of Dragon Warrior 3. While the previous games mentions only had one American town, now we've made our way to games that have multiple representations of America. For those unaware, the world of Dragon Warrior 3 is actually based upon the Earth, and Newtown represents the exploration of the New World and the establishment of America, more specifically, New York. Whereas Sioux is a small village representing the Native American tribes already established in the center of the continent. There's not really much going on at Sioux, but Newtown starts off as nothing but a barren field, but then, as you bring your immigrant merchant along, he begins to build up the town into one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. However, a cool little American revolution takes place in the city as the merchant ends up ruling the town like a king, and the common folk spark a rebellion. Number 6. Angel City and New York of God, Growth and Devolution, Heed the Call to Awaken. Besides the underage sex and dying in pregnancy, there's another reason why God probably wasn't released here in America, and that's the depiction of the country in the game. Both LA and New York are represented here, and while most of the towns were suffering under alien rule and subjugation, the Americans were instead flourishing, because they decided to screw over the rest of the world and sign a peace treaty with the aliens. Angeltown, or Los Angeles, is pretty much a den of inequity, a complete mafia-run slum full of strip clubs, and New York is a complete dump. I guess the Japanese really didn't have all that much faith in us here. So now, let's move on and look at some other games that have not just towns, but multiple American areas. Number 5. Nostalgia. Skies of Arcadia is quite simply one of the best RPGs ever made, giving you an airship and letting you explore a fantasy world. However, Nostalgia is the next best thing. Set in an alternate reality steampunk version of 19th century Earth, Nostalgia gives you an airship to travel the skies right off the bat. New York is obviously your American destination and, my god, that airship. North America is filled to the brim with world treasures to find and hidden dungeons tucked away in the Rocky Mountains. If you've never heard of this, be sure to check it out. It's one of my favorite games on the original DS. So now, let's look at some games that are pretty much wholly taking place in an American landscape. Number 4. Earthbound. More like America Bound, am I right? Well, at least the first 4 towns are. This was one of my favorite games growing up, and the opening explicitly states that it takes place in Eagle Land. I mean, come on. Each of the 4 towns are well done, chock full of interesting characters and secrets. From pizza parlors to bakeries to bus stops, ATMs, and telephones, everything that you would find in a typical American town can be found here. There's police corruption and unchecked gang activity in the unassuming Gwinnett, peaceful parks and circuses in Tucson and Threed, and then the bustling metropolis of Foreside filled with skyscrapers, department stores, and coffee shops. I mean, what's more American than having a Starbucks on every corner? Number 3. Earthbound Beginnings. This was hard for me, because the gamer in me tells me that obviously Earthbound Beginnings should be higher up on the list and it shouldn't eclipse Earthbound, because it's just not that good of a game. But that's not what I'm actually ranking here. And while Earthbound is American for the first half of the game, Earthbound Beginnings is American the entire way through. Each of the towns are surrounded by suburban sprawl and then connected by a train system. There's even failed infrastructure on the train tracks. But I digress. Each of the towns are also inspired by American equivalents, and then they're even named after American holidays, such as Mother's Day, Easter, Valentine, and Halloween. That's pretty neat. Number 2. Wild Arms 5. I'm a huge fan of the Wild Arms series, and while all of them are fully inspired by the American Old West, Wild Arms 5 definitely does it better than the rest with overt references to Johnny Appleseed, Elvis, the Mayflower, among many others. As you play the game, you'll be tripping over yourself on these old-time Americana references. And while none of the towns are explicitly based off of real-world ones like we saw earlier, they are all instead decidedly American-inspired, from the glass-domed hellscape of Les Labelle to the more vineyardy Gunan, which produces apple wine. Yeah, apples, because as American as apple pie. And number 1, Shadow Hearts from the New World. The Shadow Hearts series is fantastic, taking place in an alternate reality Earth, but while the first 2 took place in the Old World, the 3rd installment takes place in the Americas during the Roaring Twenties, starring Johnny because, quintessential little American boy name. You're going to be starting off in Chicago, making your way to New York, and then just going on down the line to pretty much every major American city you could possibly think of. And to top it off, this is one of the very few games listed here that actually takes Native American cultures into consideration as well, with 2 Native American party members, as well as their own towns and locations. It did get a bad rep upon release, but I love the trilogy. Well, that's it for the top 10 best American-inspired JRPGs. What are your favorite American-themed games or locations? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video and wanted to hear on the channel, please consider coming on over to chat and hang out on the Discord, or following me over to Twitch for some streaming fun. The link to them can be found in the video description. This has been David. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a happy 4th of July.